Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's FAMA webinar. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Kimon Argyropoulos, Senior Regulatory Policy Advisor at FAMA, and I'm delighted to moderate today's discussion. I'm also very pleased to see such a diverse audience joining us today, including industry participants, colleagues from the Commission, representatives from the Parliament and national ministries of Finance and Social Labour. I'm also pleasantly surprised to see so many registrations from my home country, Greece, so kalispera σας. Today's webinar is the third in our webinar series on pensions following our first discussion with McGill University, sharing lessons from their comparative analysis of EU and non-EU countries, and a more recent discussion co-hosted with SIFMA exploring practical insights from the US retirement system. Today's focus will be on pension tracking systems and dashboards, as you'll be aware, encouraging people to save more and promoting greater retirement savings is a growing priority in Europe, and pension tracking systems are a key part of the solution. Nevertheless, public awareness remains limited, and implementing these solutions requires certain considerations that help ensure a well-functioning system adapted to national considerations. Today's discussion is therefore particularly timely, and so this webinar is designed with a practical objective in mind to raise awareness of the importance of these tools, but also to provide inspiration and concrete lessons for member states that are currently developing or considering developing their own national solutions. With us today to explore these topics, I'm delighted to introduce three experts in the area who will share their experiences and practical insights on the development and impact of these tools. Dan Adelson Bjork is a pension economist at Min Pension. Prior to this, he spent 17 years at IMF Pension, an occupational pension company, in a range of roles. He'll be sharing with us his experience with the Swedish pension dashboard, often highlighted as one of Europe's more mature systems. Stephen Janssen is General Director of the organization in charge of running the Belgian pension dashboard, SIGDIS, for the last 18 years. Before joining SIGDIS, Stephen was Chief of Staff of the Belgian Minister of Pensions for several years. He was also served in IOPA's practitioners network on pension tracking systems. So he brings a wealth of experience on the topic. And last but not least, I'm delighted also to welcome Michael Rasch, Deputy Director of Forskering og Pension, the Danish Insurance and Pension Association. For over a couple of decades now, he's been Executive Director of Pensions Info, a platform that brings together pension providers, banks, insurance companies, and pension funds into a single ecosystem. And if I'm not mistaken, Pensions Info is one of the first, if not the first tracking systems in Europe. So Michael brings a uniquely long-term perspective on how these systems evolve over time. So a big thank you to all three of you for agreeing to participate in today's discussion. A couple of quick housekeeping points. Today's webinar will run for a total of 1 hour and 15 minutes, so expected to end at around 4:15. I'll first hand over to each of our speakers to provide a presentation of the national solutions before then moving into a broader discussion and Q&A. The session is being monitored through the chat, so please feel free to submit your questions there during the webinar. Conscious that we've got quite a lot of content to get through today, but we'll do our best to cover as many as possible to the end. But before we begin, it might be useful to briefly set the broader policy context for today's discussion. As many of you know, last November, the European Commission published its supplementary pensions package, a broad initiative aimed at supporting the development of more effective supplementary pension systems across Europe. That package includes both legislative and non-legislative measures. On the legislative side, they've announced a review of both the IRP and PEP framework, so reforms touching both the second and third pension pillars. But alongside these legislative measures, the package also includes a series of recommendations to member states. And from a farmer's perspective, these recommendations are just as important, if not potentially more impactful when it comes to unlocking greater long-term retirement savings across Europe. And that includes recommendations around taxation and auto-enrollment mechanisms, but importantly for today's discussion, pension tracking systems and dashboards. Focusing on the latter, I think the Commission is very clear in its recommendations that member states should work towards establishing comprehensive national pension tracking systems that allow citizens to access a complete overview of their pension entitlements across all three pillars and free of charge. But the objective is not to provide static information. I think the ambition is to help citizens better understand whether they're on track for retirement by providing future retirement income projections, clear and user-friendly communication, and interfaces adapted to different levels of financial literacy and digital capability. The Commission also highlights the importance of strong governance, secure data sharing frameworks, and ultimately the possibility of connecting national systems to a future European tracking service to support cross-border workers and labor mobility across the EU. Alongside those tracking systems, the package also encourages members to develop broader pension dashboards, so tools that can help monitor systems over time by bringing together aggregated data across the different pillars. And ultimately, I think the urgency behind this is quite straightforward. Across Europe, pension systems are becoming increasingly more complex and careers increasingly more mobile, and yet many citizens do not have a clear understanding of what rights they've accumulated, what level of retirement income they can realistically expect, and fundamentally whether they're saving enough for retirement. So their pension tracking systems can play a crucial role in providing that transparency and strengthening financial planning. And ultimately increasing trust and participation in supplementary pensions. So that brings us to today's discussion, because while the Commission has set out a clear direction of travel, several countries across Europe have many years, in some cases decades, of practical experience in building and operating the systems. So fortunately, we have three outstanding examples from across Europe that can hopefully provide a rich basis for discussion. So with that being said, let us begin. Our first speaker is Dan Adolfsson from Min Pension in Sweden. So Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope that you see my slides without any problems. I'm with the Swedish pension tracker, the Min Pension service. We have been around for more than 20 years, actually. And what you see here is a brief overview. I will not get that much into details because we simply have not that kind of time here. But the Min Pension dashboard is an example of a private-public partnership, which is quite odd in a Swedish context, I would say. But formally, we get 50% of our budget. We are financed from the state through the Swedish Pension Agency, and the other half come from the industry, the pension providers, the pension companies, the banks. But it's very important to emphasize that the Min Pension service is not mandatory by law. So this is something that we have made through this public-private partnership, but it's all up to that, we have this agreement with the pension providers. Quite frankly, if we are not up to standard, the pension providers could easily opt out from this service. And as of today, there are roughly 30 pension providers in total in Sweden, and everyone is connected to the Swedish PTS. So we have agreement with every one of them. And as you can see in this slide, we can cover roughly 99% of the total Swedish pension capital. And that is, if we're discussing a three-pillar structure, it's the national public pension, the occupational pension, and also private pension in most cases, actually. In Sweden, however, you could argue if there is a third pillar, because in most cases, people who have a private pension, it's not a pension from a technical standpoint. Nowadays, they have different kind of private savings that are outside the pension system, but that is perhaps another topic. what are our success story based on? Well, first of all, this collaboration between the industry and the state, it took quite some time. And you could also argue that you have some form of paradox, that perhaps people tend to think that if no pension companies connect to this dashboard, there's no value for the pension saver. On the other hand, for the pension saver, there is no value for this PTS unless the pension providers are connected. So that discussion took quite a long time for us. And I would say that in the case in Sweden, this deadlock situation, it ended when the Swedish Pension Agency allocated a larger sum of money into this project. And then all of a sudden, the different pension providers thought that, well, perhaps this is really getting traction, and therefore they began to change their minds and saw the upside with this collaboration. So that was very important. Another thing that was key to this success was a joint standard for file transfer, which took quite some time to get in place as well. And also, I'd say that the digital user interface and the digital user identity took also a lot of time. And being a PTS, we have limited resources. So we needed the experience from the industry and also from the pension agency, I'd say. So this is the three building blocks that would need to be in place in order for us to be up and running. But our service opened up the year 2004, so that is more than 20 years ago. So we have been around for quite some time. And basically, this is how it looks when you log into the Min Pension service. You can see this is the desktop version and also for mobile use. One thing that has happened the last years, there's been a quite radical shift. So nowadays, when people tend to log in, they use their mobile phone. As of now, it's roughly 70% of our users that log in using their mobile phone. And our technical infrastructure is rather old, so we have a responsive design, but it's made from the ground up, our PTS, from a desktop, so it can be, minimized for mobile use. But if we have any form of recommendation to other PTSs, it would be to go mobile first, because this is a shift that has been taking place for quite some time. And nowadays we can see that people tend to want to not only have a pension forecast in their mobile, in some cases they tend to plan their entire pension withdrawal actually using their mobile phone. So this is a shift that is very important among the users. And the Min Pension Swedish pension dashboard, we are very user-centric. We tend to care a lot about our users, and therefore it's very important when you see this shift in user behavior. And when you log into the Swedish pension dashboard, this is what you will see in the overview. You will see a pension forecast. It's very easy and straightforward. So you will see what pension will await from a certain period of time. If you like to withdraw your pension at the earlier age or later age, you could easily use this slider. I'm not going to show you now because this is a PowerPoint presentation, but it's very easy to do. Even when you are in a mobile phone, you could do this with your thumb. So the interaction is quite neat, I'd say. And this is something that we have put a lot of time and effort to have an interface that works on any kind of device. And it doesn't matter who you are, what life situation you are, this overview should be really easy for you to understand. And then you could dwell further into our tools, the details that are in our tools. For instance, we have the Earned Pension tab, where you could see, and this is not a forecast, this is actually your pension as of now. So you could see your total pension, you could see your national public pension, your occupational pension, and if you have any form of private pension. And this is particularly interesting for all users, but we can see that younger users tend to look into this information, perhaps more than the pension forecast that I showed you. And besides this, we also have the opportunity for you to go deeper if you like. Like, for instance, if I click on my occupational pension, you could see that you have like 1, 2, perhaps 3 or 4 different kind of occupational pension. You could see if you have invested in some kind of different funds, your fund selection. You could also see if you have repayment cover or not. Besides this, we have different tools, but one that I would like to highlight is our tool for pension withdrawals. This is a tool that has been up and running for the last 5 years. So in this tool, you're supposed to take your plan into action. Say, for instance, that I'm thinking about different options when it comes to my pension withdrawal. This should not be a pen and paper exercise. We're thinking about, so you should get the best digital experience here. So say, for instance, that I'm thinking about perhaps withdrawing my pension a little bit earlier or a little bit later. How will this affect my monthly payment? What kind of consequences awaits me now in a few years and as a lifelong payment? And you could also see this before and after tax. And you could go and do a very detailed planning using this tool. And we see that the users has found this tool. When we opened up this opportunity, it was not that many, but just the last 10 months, we have seen a more than 40% increase in user traffic, not just in the default screen, but in all steps of this tool. So this is something that we put a lot of time and effort to make sure that this pension planning tool is used by the big public, and especially those who are about to retire. If not now, then perhaps coming years. And so in this case, you could easily save your detailed pension plans for later use if you are to retire in like 1 or 2 years from now. And you could also, when you actually want to, call to action, you could get this detailed planning in form of a to-do list, so you know who you should contact and when. Because in Sweden, there is no central management. If you have your national public pension and you have like, in most cases, you have like 6 or perhaps 7 different kinds of occupational pensions when you retire in general. And therefore, you have to contact not only the pension agency, but in many cases, 4 or 5 different pension providers. So we will provide you with every information that you need here. But in the long run, we're hoping that we can get every pension providers connected digitally, so you could actually apply for your pension digitally using this tool as well. Finally, I would like to say a few words about user coverage, because this is something that we monitor a lot. And this is the general public, the entire population aged 16 to 80 years old. And as you can see, we have a very large proportion of the population that is close to retirement. But we also have a great potential to reach those who are in the middle of their working life. And in fact, when we're looking into new registration at the Min Pension Service, we had roughly 292,000 new registered users last year. A vast majority of them were actually in the age group up to 40 years old. So that is really encouraging. And in the long run, we'd also like to reach a larger proportion of them who have part-time retired. This is a big thing in Sweden, that you perhaps withdraw some parts of your pension and other parts you you continue to work. And also in the long run, we would reach those who have already retired and are not working at all. But that is not a stated goal today. So with that, I'd like to end my presentation and over to you.
Thanks a lot, Dan. That was extremely insightful, and great to see such positive trends on user engagement. I'd like to just follow up briefly on that topic about generally how you're measuring the success of the platform in practice. Is it primarily about overall user take up over time, or more about the patterns of engagement and depth of use? I think you mentioned a 40% increase, for example, on the projection dashboard for withdrawals. And then also related to that, 70% of users being mobile phone users. Does that also suggest an increase of engagement among younger users who typically, sometimes still perceive retirement as quite distant?
Well, we assess the success of the platform not only on how many that tend to log in or how many that are registered, but also by how they actually use the tools. So we closely monitor user behavior and engagement patterns. When it comes to younger users, they are generally less interested in the pension forecast, as I said. They are more interested in the earned pension tab that we have, that tool. So therefore, we tend to, make adaptation to that kind of information. It could be, for instance, investment choices, more information about that, or if you have repayment cover or not, according to your family situations. And we will further adapt the Min Pension tools to the younger audience this summer, the 16th of June, actually, with a stronger focus on their specific needs and preferences. So our overview for the younger users will actually change this summer.
No, that's great news, and I think that point about encouraging longer term engagement and always making these adaptations to make them the more understandable as early as possible in life is particularly significant. Turning now to Stephen and the Belgian experience of MyPension.be. Yes, happy to hand over to you for your presentation. You're on mute.
That usually doesn't help. Slightly different presentation. I will try to stay in the limits of the time that's given. Two preliminary remarks. I firmly believe that there is no such thing as a pension tracking system or the pension tracking system. So no such thing as the pension information customer, in my opinion, in the sense of people with universal needs. And so there is also no such thing as a single good model or a good practice. So if I would sound like giving good advice, just the interpretation should be this works for Belgium, or we think it's a good idea for Belgium. Doesn't necessarily mean that it will work in other countries. The second remark is that perhaps I have three remarks. So I think that what a citizen needs will be defined by how a pension system works in a very specific country. That means also that if you want to judge whether a PDS actually delivers, then you should judge it in that specific country and not against the needs of financial planners, financial markets, or for that matter, the European Commission. So you really should look at what are the needs in a specific country. Last point before I really start is that we are not communicating in isolation as pension tracking system managers. We're communicating in a context where others are communicating too. This matters because users have very little time to spend on pensions. So this very little time, you have to use it wisely, and it doesn't help when a lot of sources of information with various interests are competing for that small attention span that you're given with various and diversing messages. So you should be very wise on what you do and choose to do. And I think if Belgium is a special case in one regard, then it's that we try to limit the diversity of communications. in an attempt to get better communication. So not more communicating, but less communicating, and hoping that we will have better communication in the end. I will say certain things about the Belgian pension system, not because it's interesting, but because it helps explaining why we made certain choices that we think work for Belgium. So first of all, situation 20 years ago, and long before too, we have basically still three professional systems: employees, self-employed, and civil servants. Not going into detail about that. We still have two institutions. We come from a lot more, still two institutions managing all that. They're both very much data dependent. So Belgian pensions are not calculated on premiums paid, but are calculated on time and reference wages you had during your career. So we have to track that. Our database started somewhere in the 60s with detailed career information. But basically, our pension tracking starts with career tracking. If you track the career, you will find the pension. That's basically how it goes. There's a lot of interdependency, a lot of orchestration on IT level and on legal level that needs to be done to combine these three professional systems. But the thing is that in 2006, we decided to hide this complexity for the user and to use one single front desk to communicate with the user, with the citizen. Now, to get, because it's also something Dan said, you don't need to create an account. You don't need to register. Anyone with a Belgian EID or an EID or another means of authentication recognized in the European EIDAS framework can log in Belgium. So that's not the issue. We will try to find your data back because we know how you're identified in our databases, and we will show your data. So no use for registration or creating accounts up front. Probably the account is waiting for you if we can find you. It's a front desk. It's not a tracking system because a lot of extra services that are also integrated in the tool on the browser, but also on your smartphone. You can do your pension administration over there. I'm talking about first pillar here. You can do your pension claiming. You can do follow-up of the payments. So for me, that's a lot of services combined online, but you have the same on paper. You can have the same on the phone. You can make an appointment and have a physical contact. So for us, that's why I call it at the title a pension information ecosystem. There are a lot of things that are combined, but they are all built on the same backbone of IT orchestration in the back office. So we try to hide that for the user to give him one platform for all his administration. To be complete, we also use the same data for what could be seen as our pension dashboard, but that's our statistical website on how the Belgian pension system is performing in terms of pension paid out. Now, if you go and look at the second pillar, it came a lot later. So a lot of these things were already existing at that time. Our first pillar was much faster than our second pillar, and it started as a data collecting project in Belgium. The Belgian legislator made it mandatory for all pension providers, be it insurers or pension funds, but also employers still managing book reserves, made it mandatory to send regularly periodic updates of the assets they're managing, and especially the accounts, individual accounts with entitlements they're managing, to update that in a central database, not to help the individual, but to help public institutions. This is basically in the beginning a data set to help public authorities to do their job vis-a-vis the second pillar pensions. All the errors are going both ways. That's because we also decided at that time to use all the data present in the what I call the public data system or data ecosystem, data already available with public authorities, but necessary or useful for the management of pensions, second pillar pensions. We also send that data back. If one of your members dies, he marries, he changes address, even his bank account in the payout phase, bank account numbers we know because we pay first pillar pension. We send it to the second pillar, to the providers that are concerned, so they can, in many cases, have a completely automated payout of second pillar pensions. Now, so we also put it in PensionStat. It's only in 2016 that we added the second pillar. That's 10 years later than the first pillar. We used the same platform, the same building blocks technologically that already existed, and we added the second pillar data. But most users don't understand why they are in a digital environment, and they have some functionalities working for the first pillar, not working for the second pillar, and that is why we are gradually moving now to extend all the functionalities I mentioned for the first pillar, like pension administration, pension claiming, and follow-up of payments. We extend this to the second pillar, so you can actually claim your second pillar also via mypension.be. We know which provider has still accounts for you. We contact them and saying, hey, this person wants to be paid out. There's also a link with the first pillar payment in Belgium, so there's not always a choice for individuals to be made. But the big bang, I think, and I talk about not competing for attention, will happen in October of this year. All the pension overviews that normally need to send to their members each year, they will be centralized and will be generated from the central system. So by the end of this year, we will have a complete standardization of language, information architecture, of information content. It will be presented the same way it's online. It will also be presented on the pension overviews you can get via us or even via your pension provider, because we linked the two. Now, so this is the framework. We now have first and second pillar all integrated in one pension tracking service platform. What are we seeing when you log in? I was not going to do a demo either because of all the problems you usually have. What's important for us is that we decided to do a cross-pillar global overviews, because we know from experience that about 65% don't click further than the first screen. So that also means that our focus needs to be spot on the first screen. We had two screens, or we still have two screens, but that will disappear in October, where there is this general screen, a home screen, and then the next screen with actual information. That's one screen too much. So we eliminate the home screen, we go directly to your personal pension overview. And the focus in Belgium, which covers 95%, between 90 and 95% of all needs, is basically, do I have a pension? When can I get it? And how much will it be? There's very little choice in the Belgian pension system. Your first pillar is completely mandatory, no choices. The second pillar is sponsor driven. There's hardly any choice unless you're a self-employed person, and the civil servants don't even have a second pillar by law in Belgium. So there's no element of choice we have to cater to. Our main mission is to keep track of all the entitlements people can have over across the pillars. But what we see on this screen is that you actually have three pillars in Belgium. There was a long discussion about whether to show the third pillar or not. But we know from experience that people don't understand the difference between a second and a third pillar. They're both complementary. They're both additional. So whatever language you use, they will get it wrong. We decided to show what we don't know. I guess that within 5 to 10 years, we will have the third pillar because data are available. There's just no political consensus of adding it. But so we also already made it possible to have an overview of what should be there and then focus on what we actually have in terms of information. What I forgot to say is that it's completely user tested. But what's even more important in the Belgian context, it's tested with the social partners, because since we are intervening in their privileged communication, employer-employee, pension provider and member, we are now intervening in that. We're now going to take over this complete communication because we are going to make up the pension overviews. We needed to get their agreement on this is how we want you to communicate with our members, with our labor union members or the members of a pension fund or the employees of an employer. So user testing is one thing, getting a completely consensus with the social partners on the language we use, that was a second thing. Now, where a lot of good models like the EIOPA model go completely over the cliff in Belgium is in what we show about the pillars. So as I said, do I have a pension? There's the three pillars. We check whether you have it. When can I get it? The second major question. And in Belgium, you have two dates are important. That's your legal pension age, and that's your first possible take-up date. A lot of people still go for this first one. my first eligible date. The government is talking about the legal age. People are acting on the first eligible date. We see that we have the information for the first and the second pillar. First pillar, we have the first possible date, second, and legal pension age. We don't have the information for the second pillar, not because Belgian pension providers are not capable of calculating it. There's simply no consensus, neither under the social partners nor on the political level, to have that mandatory in the database and on the pension overview. It's too bad, but that's how it is. So all the great ideas about accumulated totals and the global overviews, it starts breaking down there. A second big problem is that our first pillar is completely in annuities. So we show the annuities in net amounts. These are monthly annuities. Our second pillar is almost completely lump sum. This is one-time payment. We give you the net amount, and that's it. So adding up annuities, well, you can add up an annuity from the first pillar that's real, and a fictional annuity from the second pillar, but it has no relation to the reality of the future pensioner. We do give an indication of what the monthly amount is, because we know that people have a hard time understanding lump sums, especially because lump sums in Belgium are on average much lower than the amount you see here. There are even people who have lump sums around 3,000–4,000 euros, which could actually be mistaken for an annuity. So we for educational reasons, we do a conversion. I'm not going to say anything anymore about the first pillar because we're going in a reform. We don't know what information will be shown next year. We will go offline with certain information as soon as the law is voted, because we cannot vouch anymore for the correctness of the data. And the single most important asset you have as a national tracking system is trust. And if we cannot make sure that people can trust what we show, we rather take the info offline. That's very tough for a pension tracking service to do so, but we will do so for the first pillar. So I will show you just what we have on the second pillar. You will go down, drill down, specifically the view now. This is already the second click. So you choose to have detailed information on your second pillar. We give you an overview on the accumulated amounts up to date and what you probably will have in the end across all your schemes. And you see that this person here at the bottom has two schemes: an active scheme, still contributing in that scheme, and a dormant account. There's one person we know who has 157 schemes. On average, people have 1.9 schemes. So it's quite okay, this overview. Of course, people can get third time, and then we're at the remaining 20% of users. We lost the rest already. Then you will go into the detail of that one scheme you clicked on. And here you see all the IROP information popping up. The different scenarios, the checking between whether I stay with the employer, I leave the employer, I die, what will happen. You get different information. You have this additional amounts. Then you have what we call the bank account approach. What were your vested reserves last year? What were the ins and outs in taxes, costs, returns on investment, new premiums that were paid? All this, by the way, we do for insurers and funds. So if Europe starts meddling with the IROP 2 directive, it will have a direct impact on insurers in Belgium too, because the Belgian legislator said that citizens should have the same information regardless of the choice of provider that the sponsor actually made. So it's one set of information always for all kinds of providers. As I said, we will generate pension overviews on paper, which follows the same structure. So you have complete standardization between online and on paper. We were also the first country to connect to ETS, but I will not go into that. I gave you a lot of annexes. I will not go into detail. If you want to have user data, a breakdown of which kind of users, where they click on, I put it all in the extras on the slides, which will be distributed, I heard before. That's it. A bit over time, I'm afraid.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, Stephen. Very interesting times with the potential upcoming changes to the first pillar pensions. I guess also with a review of the IOP2 directive. One theme that came through clearly in your presentation was the importance of communication and user comprehension. I think pensions are inherently complex, and many citizens are unfamiliar with pension terminology. And this, of course, remains a citizen-facing tool. And I guess the idea is not to overload them with too much information. And you mentioned as well the need to use that time wisely. So my question is, how did you go about this? Did you conduct any user testing around the language, presentation of information?
Yeah.
What was your approach?
Well, of course, the kind of scenarios you can test are defined by a pension system you have. We could not test scenarios with global annuities, for instance, but I think I illustrated that. We were testing in parallel two things, because we needed to make sure that what the social partners found acceptable was understandable for the users, and what users preferred was acceptable for the social partners. So we had, for a couple of weeks, bilateral talks with social partners here at Sigris, and at the same time testing scenarios that were the result of these negotiations. And then, so it was a feedback the whole time. But we tested, well, you have to know, there is not a second pillar in Belgium. You have industry schemes, you have company schemes, you have individual schemes for employers, individual schemes for self-employed, you have company schemes for self-employed. So you have this variety, and they all needed to fit into one model, because that's what the law says in Belgium. So we needed to have a variety, sufficient variety amongst the users. We wanted users that actually have second pillars, so we could test whether they recognize these data, because understanding a theoretical case is one thing, understanding your own situation is something else. But that was a very instructive time, and I think we should redo that once so often. Not only when we change things, but see whether the initial assumptions are still valid. This time we're meddling with first and second pillar and global screens, so there's a lot of testing to be done, and a lot of checking whether we have to look over the shoulder and see whether the social partners are still following.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Maybe a quick follow-up question to that. I mean, Dan also mentioned the deadlock in Sweden before. I mean, how difficult was it to get large-scale participation and to get the social partners on board with all this?
Well, the first pillar took itself. The remaining first pillar institutions were themselves the ones who took the initiative to build a tracking system. So you have 100% coverage of the first pillar immediately. First pillar in Belgium still accounts for, let's say, 94% of all pension income. All people working legally in Belgium, I'm not talking about black market, what some countries call gray economy, but it's as black as it is in Belgium. So if you're working and you have an entitlement, it's in my pension. So we had a monopoly, and there was no alternative. So that helps. Adding the second pillar, of course, we had the law saying that all pension providers should deliver information. But there's this big debate in Europe. Should it be on a voluntary basis, or should you have a law? Well, we had a law and did everything on a voluntary basis, because all the obligations or the defined instruction, the detailed instructions, are always defined in consensus with the pension providers. So you have the law making sure that they sit at the table to discuss, but then from that point on, it's on a voluntary basis. And we now should have a coverage of 100%, but I'm not going to put my hand in the fire to prove that. And then you basically have this one door to all data monopoly, and there's no competition. That helps. And we tripled in the last 9 years. We tripled the number of visitors from 1.3 million a year to 3.8, I think, million a year visitors. Some of them recurring.
Great. Thanks a lot, and that's good news on increased users. Michael, turning to you, I understand that you might be having a little bit of trouble sharing your presentation.
I think, can you see it now?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. I'll give the Danish perspective with the Danish PTS and quite a different view than both Stephen and Dan. Just shortly about the Danish pension system. It is a 3-pillar system. Pillar 1, old age state pensions, and then a supplementary state pension. The pension is means tested, and it's a pay as you go, and there is no freedom of choice within Pillar 1. And then probably a bit different than most other European countries, we have Pillar 2 that is collective bargaining, and it's mandatory. It's defined contribution, all of them, and auto enrollment, and 90% of all employees have a second pillar pension. And then there are the private pensions in Pillar 3 in mostly banks, but also some commercial life insurance companies. So that's the fast version of the Danish pension system. And looking into the National Tracking Service of Denmark, Pensionsinfo, it's a private association. In the Swedish model, it was 50-50. This is just a private association of all providers, including a supplementary state Pillar 1 pension. And it covers all 3 pillars. There's no legislation. It's free for pension providers to join. At the moment, there are 90 providers and covers like 99% of all providers. And earlier, like 20 years ago, it was almost 200 pension providers, but merging primarily in banks meant that we are now at 90 different providers. And the first version was launched in December of '99. And the second version, which meant that more providers joined, was in May of 2007. So it's quite some years ago. It was a tough start. It was difficult to get everybody to join in the beginning, and this is mostly if there are countries that are thinking of creating a tracking service, then this would be a bit important. In the beginnings, it was only 3 providers, mostly collective bargaining pension providers, and 3 started it in '99, and then a couple of providers joined every year. But the big issue was it didn't give the user the full overview of the different pensions. Many had different Pillar 2 pensions at different providers, and maybe 1 or 2, but not all of their 4 maybe providers was shown. So it didn't give the Danes that pension overview that was hoping for at the time. So you only saw like 30-40% of it, but not all. So at the time, there was a bit of a political pressure regarding the schemes that both banks and also commercial life insurance companies should join. And if they didn't join, there would have been legislation that everybody should join the national tracking services. And at the time, both the commercial in 2007 compromises were made, and both banks and commercial pension providers joined at the time. And one of the reasons why they joined was the ability for the user to send and generate a PDF report and send it to the bank and to the pension provider, or also the ability to export their own data if they decide to a pension provider. So it was not just a cost for the provider. There were some benefits from joining the tracking service. But it still took a long time to get all providers to join, and they firstly joined. The last one joins in 2014. So that was almost 15 years after the first version was launched. There were made some key decisions early in the PTS, and the key decisions really remain in place. Access to the data is the user only, and we do not store data. Data is gathered when the user logs on to the website. Requests are sent to all the user's providers, and then data is delivered online to the PTS. And when the user leaves the site, the data is deleted. We also wanted to keep the information simple, as both Dan and Steven said, making sure you show the absolute minimum of information at the first layer, and then the user can dig into different layers of information. We have 3 layers of information on our website, but very important, keep it simple, especially when you move on to a mobile phone. It has to be even more simple than you imagine at the first time. Then we have one data model used by all providers. That's also a key feature. Showing information, standardized information, also as Steven said, you show it all information in kind of the same way. What's also important in the Danish side, we don't give recommendations or advice on the website. The showing of the information is all neutral. Is this enough? That's not something the user can see on the website. That's something they have to talk to a provider or advisor about. And then one of the issues that also generated quite some traffic on our website was the ability with single sign-on from online banking and pension portals directly to our website without a new login. That is also something that really generated a lot of traffic back in, still do, but especially back in 2007, 8, 9. That was where most users came from. They came from online banking. A little bit about the site. How does it look? It's this is just a demo version, as there's a layered information. So on the left side is what is the current savings for the user in Danish crowns from the different providers. What's the capital that is generated, and it's typically the day before login. On the right side of the overview is what can you expect to get when you retire, and in this case it's 67. It's the official retirement age for state old age pension, and you get in this case a lump sum, and then also both and under what do you get of a payout yearly over a number of years, and that is just to get then the overview of your pensions. You can dig further into it. We also have some insurances. What is paid out if I die, or what if I get or the user gets a critical illness or loses the ability to work? What is the yearly payout? That is some insurances that are connected to a pension scheme in Denmark. And if you go to the second layer, just looking at pensions, this is the combined overview of what can the user expect to get when they retire. It is pension forecast that is delivered by the different pension providers, and here it's combined and showed in a graph. And in this case, the user has chosen 67, but the user can also choose another retirement age, 63, for example, or 70, and then they can see the pension projections for those ages and what can they expect to get. And in the graph, the orange is a lump sum, the blue is a phased withdrawal, what is paid out in this case over 15 years. The green one is the green color is the lifelong annuity, and the purple one is the basic amount for state old age pension. So that was a bit about the website and how information is shown. A little bit about the use. As you can see, it started out in 2000. We went from a yearly logons, 45,000 logons to last year, 7.3 million logons. So, and in the first 5-6 years where the user couldn't get a full overview, not many Danes decided to log on to the website. But from 2007 and forward, it really took off, and now we are at a level where around 2.3 or 4 million different Danes log on every year. Some log a few times, and some only log on once a year. User engagement, a little bit about that. 55% use their mobile phone, and the desktop is logons on desktop is around 43, and the time they spend on the website on a desktop, it's a bit more than 8.5 minutes, and on a mobile phone it's 4 minutes, a little less than 5 minutes they use on the website. And there's a little bit about what are the pages they are looking at and how long do they use, but you'll get the presentation, so I won't dig into that. Just data export. I think we are one of the only pension tracking service where the user themselves can send or export their own, decide to send or export their data to a pension provider, and that is the feature that's really used. It has been there since 2007. Fintechs and brokers could join the tracking service, and the user has the ability to export or send their data to them if they decided. The data export is used at the providers to do pension planning, self-enrollment, credit rating, financial overview, and other services delivered by the providers, and not our website, but the providers, banks, pension providers, and others. And that is something we really can see a huge development within the last few years. Last year in 2025, 2.3 million exported their data to a provider, and in 2019 it was only 680,000, and the number is still increasing. Challenges. What have been our challenges within this whole setup? I have categorized into 2 different set up the association. It's very important that there are trust between the different companies and pension providers within the industry to make this happen, having a ETS or a PTS. And then you have to have a strong, robust governance for the association. We have a very well functioning board of directors that has been well functioning for many years. That's also very important. And then also a well-balanced finance model that could develop over time. But there are a huge difference between small members and huge members, and you have to have a balanced financing model for that. That is something in the Danish setup has been important. Challenges regarding running the site, as I mentioned earlier, it's very difficult to get all providers to join, and in the Danish case, it took a long time, and it didn't help. There were no
It seems that we've lost Michael briefly. Perhaps turning, I guess, in the meantime, to Dan and Stephen. I think an open question whilst we're talking about the challenges is
future.
Whilst we, hi Michael, you're back. Yeah. Yeah, no. Whilst we wait for you to re-upload your presentation, I would I'd go to the other speakers and ask on the sort of lessons learned perspective, if there's one sort of main lesson, having had all the knowledge and experience that you've had,
Yeah.
what would the sort of the key takeaway be for, let's say, member states who are considering developing their own tools?
I think getting the industry and maybe the state joined and have like kind of like the Swedish setup, a 50-50 model, and then make some decisions early on that everybody agrees on. Yes, we want to make this, but start slowly and then take it step by step. That would be my advice to the new countries. Maybe I should just stop sharing.
Yes. Perhaps turning now to Dan.
And I
Any lessons
agree.
from your side?
I agree, but most importantly, my key recommendation for member states to build their own PTS would be to have the perspective of the user, not from a top-down institutional view. So you should focus on the user's real needs, their questions and their behaviors when you design your PTS. Because you need to be relevant, you need to be easy to use in everyday life. And people are interested in their pension, but not everything that comes with pension, and not too much detailed information. If there's no demand for it, you cannot, force people onto it. So you could say that, after all, people enjoy playing PlayStation, but very few are interested in studying the circuit board of the console. So that is, I'd say, the most important aspect, user-centric approach.
Great. Stephen, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, elaborating on that last one, a couple of years ago, there were discussions a couple of years ago, almost 10 years ago, London and Berlin about whether they should build something. And I think the lack of focus was the problem, because the things I heard in London was you can never have enough data to have an holistic overview of the financial future of an individual. Well, probably you can't, but that's not what the users are asking for. And if you keep focusing on the wrong thing, you will never start, because you will always see the insurmountable problems and you never get started. I said, focus on something specific. And then the second thing is get started. Stop analyzing until everybody is at the pensionable age themselves. So start building something, learn from experience what was a good approach, what worked less, and then develop on that. Although with one nuance, you don't get many chances with the public. If you completely go wrong and you go live with something that doesn't work, then you have a hard time to win the trust again. So it's not like, I'm not saying just run ahead and see whatever happens. No, but make sure that you have an iterative approach and do with manageable, feasible steps. Don't try to overload the garage. And then, so it's a bit all the things that have been said combined, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, and of course, I mean, look, I've seen as well from all your presentations that an optimistic point is that user engagement has increased over time. But my question as well to all of you would be, what are you doing as well? You talked about the need to get this right, and to do it incrementally. What are you doing to sort of raise awareness of these platforms, and what would you sort of explain the increase in engagement with? Is it just you suppose is it about the simplicity? What would you sort of explain it?
Well, since I'm still unmuted, perhaps. Well, it's a bit in the same line. If you focus on users' needs, their needs will define whether they actually use your tool. If they need to know, they will come. Of course, that's the bitter thing. We are very much helped in Belgium with a continuous talk on a political level about the bankruptcy of the pension system and the need for pension reforms and the everybody is talking very tough about the importance of the measures they took, and then we see spikes in visitors. People want to check what it means for them. So it's still the same questions: do I have a pension, or do I still have a pension? When can I go now? And how much is left of my pension? That's how it translates after the political filter. But that's free publicity for you too, in a very bitter and cynical way. Huh? The context defines the needs, and those needs, when they're fulfilled on your side, people will come.
Great. So simplicity, importance in designing it in a way that really reflects individual needs, and also, I suppose, a challenge of interoperability. And on that point, I think, given that focus and I suppose the Commission's ambition to help individuals get a better view of their pensions across the EU, it would be remiss of me not to mention the European Tracking Service. So my question would be that, I mean, and yet there's still huge gaps, I suppose, in the exchange of data at the European level. So how do you assess its potential? Do you think it's the right time to Europeanize? Do you think right now it's better that we focus on best practice? Happy to hear from each of you on this one. Perhaps starting with Dan.
Well, first of all, you need to have the building blocks in place. So that is number one. Is it possible to build a good PTS? Do you have the foundation for that? Do you have the common standard for data and file transfers? Do you have this collaboration in place between the public sector and the pension industry? That is key. So you need like the trust, the data quality, and the broad coverage, which can only be achieved through a close and long-term cooperation. So this is not, development that can take place from one day to another. You have to accept the fact that it takes time. And also I would like to emphasize the thing that Stephen said, that you cannot force people into this. That is the wrong approach. The fact that we had 62 million pension forecasts last year reflects that we provide something that the pension users value and actively want to use. So you should have that standpoint that you need to be user-centric. And in our case, the collaboration between the state and the industry, for us, it's the key to success, because they all recommend our site, and therefore we have a lot of user traffic. So that is something that you need this framework to be put on place before you can actually open up on a PTS. Otherwise, there's really no, it's not meaningful, I'd say.
Michael, would you agree with that point?
Yeah, I agree very much. I think, as you can see, the three different sites that we just showed today are very different, and the pension systems are very different. The taxation system, the state old age pension, is very different from the different countries. So imagine showing all that information combined is extremely complex. So instead of having an comprehensive overview on a European level, I think having a ETS, but then referring to, okay, have you been working in Denmark? Log on to the Danish website. Is it English? Log on to the Swedish website if you have been working there, because the information there is a lot more information you can show on the national tracking service instead of the European, and combining pensions from different countries is extremely difficult. And at the moment, I guess you show PDFs of information on the European tracking service. So instead of trying to develop a European fully service solution, I'd rather say, okay, if you've been working Denmark or Sweden, or Belgium, log on to their national sites.
Great, and I guess Stephen.
Yeah, first of all, a disclaimer: we're already in the system. So, secondly, we have been working with the Pensioenmyndigheden, Minpension, and also with Michael in the past. So it's not completely without any previous steps in this process. I think it's all a bit true. I think the big discussion first of all, Europe should forget for the first decade, coming decade, that we will have this very big pension or financial information data model of things that will be exchanged. Will not happen in pensions. We had a hard time discussing a very modest, small data set. We're actually focusing is still the same. It's about focus. Do you have a pension in Belgium? How much is it and when can you get it? The first thing we did now is, do we have a pension in Belgium? Yes. And as proof of the fact that you have a pension, here is a PDF overview of the information. And if you want to know more, go over to mypension.be. I think this last step will be there in any scenario. The point will be, where will be your cutoff point? How far to get at least some useful information on a joint basis on the ETS website? I think we will still keep the PDF in the long run, because it will always be this extra, more contextualized information than the standardized data you will have in your data set. But I think it's doable. I think we can do better. Prefer. That will frustrate users very much if they go to a website just to learn that they have to go to another website. I think we should do a bit more to give at least an indication of, yeah, it's worthwhile to go to the Swedish website because you have something there. That's like just go, no go. And if in addition we could have this little data set of meaningful information, and I think we can, it's being tested now conceptually with the Germans and the French and the Dutch. So that would at least cover our neighboring countries, so we're in the clear. No, I forgot about Luxembourg. But I think that's the vision level we should have, and I think I still believe it's doable. But we should step away from some ideas we had, let's say, 8, 9, 10 years ago about we will have this joint platform of all this rich information we have at the national level. No, that will not be the case. Not in my active period, I think.
Yeah, and I guess that goes back to your point of using that time wisely and maintaining that engagement. Look, I think we're unfortunately approaching the end of today's webinar. I think first of all, let me thank you, Dan, Stephen, and Michael for your presentations very warmly. I think thanks for sharing your practical experiences, your lessons, and your honest reflections around the challenges. I'll do my best to quickly sum up the different talking points. I think for me, today's discussion has shown that pension tracking systems are not just digital tools. They're an important instrument to strengthen citizens' understanding of their retirement outcomes and to support their better long-term financial decision making, whereas the Commission's recommendations point towards a future where citizens in Europe should be able to access clear, comprehensive, and understandable information. Today's discussion also reminds us that there's no one single model. Different governance structures can work, different institutional arrangements can work, and different implementation paths as well. What matters is building systems that the citizens trust and actually use. And I think the main lessons that emerged today are the importance of simplicity and clarity, the importance of accessibility and user-centric design, cooperation, I suppose, across providers as well, and then the importance of maintaining a long-term vision and to keep gradually working on these platforms through consumer testing, looking at what's worked, what can be improved, etc. So I hope today's webinar has provided some ideas and practical guidance to the audience. I'd like to sincerely thank you all as well who joined us today and who contributed their questions. We greatly value your participation. A quick reminder that this discussion will be available on IFAMA's YouTube channel. So feel free to rewatch this as many times as you like, or to share with any interested parties or colleagues. We will be following up with the material. So and as well, if you're interested in learning more, please feel free to reach out directly. I wish you all an excellent afternoon, and we look forward to continuing this important discussion going forward. So thanks a lot to all of you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Bye.